So, I recently saw Phase 4's latest entry, Thor: Love and Thunder, and well, it's not good. It's bad. It's really bad. As I thought about it on the ride home from the theater, I started to think about Phase 4 overall and why I've been so disappointed with everything coming out of it lately. In today's video, we're going to take a critical look at Phase 4 and try to figure out just why it isn't working. Before we talk about Thor: Love and Thunder though, let's quickly take a look at how we got here. So, starting Phase 4 off with a bang, we got Black Widow. If you even count this one as Phase 4, I don't know. What should have been made years ago, this one felt really lazy and overall confusing to watch. It ended up becoming all about setting up Yelena in the MCU, leading to an unbelievably lame and nonsensical arc in Hawkeye because she thinks Clint killed her. Don't get me wrong, I love Florence Pugh and I like her as Lyanna, but it doesn't really feel like there's anything for her to do going forward. I just think overall there's some truly awful choices made here. And what was with that weird bait and switching of Taskmaster? Not one I would ever watch again. Shang Chi was pretty cool actually. I liked it quite a bit, but I wouldn't even put it in my top 10 of MCU content. It was a pretty average origin story with some cool ideas, but unfortunately falling victim to a predictable huge CGI battle in the third act, as most of the superhero genre does. I will say though, the action choreography was a breath of fresh air, but overall I didn't really care about what's next for him or the Ten Rings storyline in general. Eternals is actually an amazing movie if you need something to help you fall asleep. I don't really have much to say about it, as the thought of it just kind of makes me sleepy. Weak characters, even weaker villain, weak script, boring plot. Honestly, I forget this movie even exists from time to time. I guess they set up Kit Harington's character to be Black Knight. You know, Black Knight, that guy with the cursed sword. Yeah. According to some people, this was also Blade's introduction to the MCU, setting up some kind of connection between him and Black Knight, which I guess we'll see maybe in Blade going forward. But honestly, I don't know. Who cares? Spider-Man No Way Home was pretty cool. But come on, it's Spider-Man. Of course it's going to be a standout from the rest of the schlock we get for that reason alone. It was really cool to see Tom Spider-Man interact with all the other characters from the multiverse. Toby and Andrew being involved was a dream come true, and overall I had a great time with it. Is it a perfect movie? Hell no. I definitely have some issues with it, but it's just nitpicky stuff that really doesn't take away from my enjoyment of the movie. Yeah, people have made arguments that it's all fan service, and honestly I can't really disagree with that, but this is fan service done as well as I think they could have done it with the story they wanted to tell. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I was really looking forward to this one. The way they were hyping up to be a huge multiversal adventure with Sam Raimi, one of my favorite directors, coming on board to really spice things up. While his flavoring is definitely sprinkled throughout the movie, overall it was a pretty tame and generic experience for what is supposed to be the Multiverse of Madness. We explored 2, 3 universes, barely, and what could have been a really interesting and exciting plotline with the introduction of Illuminati ends up being quite literally ripped away from us in a matter of minutes by the Scarlet Witch. The movie just ends up being kind of a cat and mouse chase for the majority of the runtime, with Strange running away with America MacGuffin until the rushed and underwhelming conclusion that left me feeling pretty empty. I haven't even talked about the Disney Plus offerings that are sprinkled in as little filler between the movies. You don't have to watch them, but if you don't want to be confused about some of the plot lines and characters in the movies, I guess you're gonna have to buckle in. And holy shit, are there way too many of them, what feels like a never-ending stream of them to come. Let's start with WandaVision. I was really into the first few episodes, but it quickly veered off into the land of nonsense and ended up with another lazy CGI fight between Agatha and Wanda. Vision fucks off, never to be seen again, and we're introduced to Monica Rambeau, which I guess is going to be in the Marvels. This show is pretty much required viewing to fully understand Doctor Strange 2, and it almost feels like that's all it really comes down to. It feels like a waste of time knowing how they go on to ruin Wanda's character in that movie. Also, I'll never really forgive them for teasing us with the X-Men and the whole multiverse thing with Evan Peters' Quicksilver, just to be slapped in the face with a stupid boner joke. Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Not much to say about this one. I barely remember anything that happened, other than it being set up for Sam Wilson to become the new Captain America, and I guess we'll be seeing him in Captain America 4. We also got the introduction of US Agent, and it was alright, I guess. He'll probably show up again with Valentina somewhere down the line, but honestly, who fucking cares? Loki. Alright, I'm probably gonna get a lot of flack for this one, but I don't really care. It's just my opinion. I thought Loki was really overhyped. I mean like Black Panther levels of overhyped. Please don't kill me for saying that either. I just feel like they really dropped the ball on Loki's character. This version of him is supposed to be the one that was just launching an alien attack on New York against the Avengers, not the one that hangs out with Thor and Ragnarok and tries to save him in Infinity War. This is before all of that. He should be stronger, smarter, the master of deception and mischief, but he doesn't really do anything convincing the whole season. Instead, he ends up being almost a side character in his own show, gets his ass kicked at every turn, and by the end of the series, he's supposed to be a changed man, a romantic one even, who falls in love with a female version of himself. Most of the show is boring dialogue with some almost cool action set pieces. It felt like the main point of the show was to set up Kang and the multiverse stuff, and Loki is just kind of there. The direction, editing, pacing, writing, characterization, and general plot left a lot to be desired, and the contrived nonsense that happens in the finale to set up Kang left me scratching my head. Hawkeye. Let's be honest, this show is about Kate Bishop. For Disney to finally give Hawkeye his own self-titled entry in the MCU, only to have him pushed to the side and come across like he doesn't even want to be there, was honestly really disappointing to watch. Clint doesn't really have a character arc, doesn't really do much, and ultimately feels like he's just there to pass the torch to Kate. Without diving too deep into it, the tone was about the same as most of the recent MCU offerings, lighthearted, silly, and fun. Kingpin shows up, but they nerfed the shit out of him compared to the version in Netflix's Daredevil. It isn't shot in a very interesting or creative way, just feels cheap and super boring to look at. I could say this about most of the Disney Plus series honestly, but it felt more apparent in this one. By the end, this show feels like set up for Echo, which is arguably the most uninteresting and boring character in the entire show, and the fake out Kingpin death felt pretty corny. Moon Knight, probably my favorite out of the bunch, mostly due to the incredible performance here by Oscar Isaac. The dude really carries the show, and without him, I don't think it would have worked as well as it does. A lot of time is spent between Steven and Mark, and you can always clearly feel which personality is which. Oscar is able to go back and forth between them masterfully at the turn of a switch. As for the plot, most of it is a confused and bumbling Steven going on an adventure trying to figure out what's going on with him. With some pretty interesting and creative ideas, most of the episodes serve their purpose and give us something actually kind of fresh. Episode 5 was the highlight for me and gave us some great backstory with some strong writing and acting all around. As for the actual Moon Knight stuff, I thought it was pretty cool when we got it, but I don't think they gave us enough of it. Most of these series are only about 6-ish episodes long, and if you're going to try to cram your whole story into such a limited amount of time, every episode should count for something and move the plot along in a way that justifies the runtime. This is my biggest complaint with Moon Knight, because by the time we get to the finale, it feels like we kind of just got to the nitty-gritty of the plot, so it ends up feeling extremely rushed and aimless. A trend that I've noticed in every one of these shows so far. They really spend a lot of time and effort teasing and setting up a third personality with Jake, and I guess that's going to lead into a second season. I kind of slept through Miss Marvel, and honestly it felt like a chore to watch. Don't really have much to say about it, as it's not really my cup of tea, but the main takeaway I had from it was the reveal that Kamala is a mutant, and the bangle made her kind of like switch places with Captain Marvel, teleporting her to who knows where. I guess we'll see more of that story in the Marvels. Ultimately, most of these, if not all of them, are one-time watches to fill in the gaps of the movies. On their own, they don't really hold up that well or hold up to second viewings. And now that I've briefly summarized my thoughts on all the individual entries so far, do you notice something they all share? They're basically just set up for something that A, isn't really that interesting, or B, isn't clear to us yet. There doesn't really seem to be a good sense of direction and excitement for what's coming next. Not that I think everything being set up for the next is a good thing, but that's kind of what we've been conditioned to expect from the MCU, and why Infinity War and Endgame were massive cinematic events with levels of excitement and hype that I don't think will ever be matched again. These movies worked so well because they were the culmination of an 11-year buildup. Even with all the duds, it was something truly special that I don't think we'll ever really experience again. With the Infinity Saga and Thanos story arc now complete, and most of the characters we've grown so attached to now out of the picture, what's the plan for Marvel Studios? Everything after Endgame has felt like Marvel went back to the start of Phase 1, but this time around we get a lame, half-assed attempt to capture that lightning in a bottle. With a constant assembly line of content being pumped out about every 3 weeks or so because they know how heavily invested we are in the MCU, they're forgetting about what made us so invested in the first place. With all that being said, let's finally take a deep dive into Thor, Love, and Thunder. With most of the OGs either dead or just not around anymore, Thor is the last member of the big three. He's arguably the biggest and longest standing member of the MCU that they still have, with this being his 4th solo movie. So going into this one, I was really excited. I love Thor Ragnarok for the most part, even though goofy Thor kind of annoyed me here and there, but overall Ragnarok does a decent job of balancing the silliness with the seriousness. I'd say it's about 50-50 in that one. Love and Thunder cranks up the goofy knob considerably, and it felt like 90% jokes, 10% seriousness. Some people might really like that choice, but I don't think it works very well this time around. Looking back on Ragnarok, at the time, the change in tone was fresh and arguably necessary after the two super serious, dull Thor movies. This is before he lost literally everything and everyone he had, which is why the depressed, regretful, and lost version of Thor we got in Infinity War and Endgame made a lot of sense. Now, we're left with a Thor who has no obligations, no sense of purpose in his life, and doesn't really know what to do with himself. And I just don't think it works well here. I saw this movie on opening night with noticeably less of a crowd than usual, which was surprising for an MCU movie, and I don't think there were more than 1 or 2 big laughs throughout the entire runtime. For a movie that's littered with comedy in literally every scene, you think it would be funny, right? And that's the issue, it's just not funny at all. This style of comedy feels like it was written by children. I've also seen people say it felt like a long SNL bit with no satisfying ending. The screaming goats thing got a solid exhale through the nose out of me the first time they showed up, and I pray that it would be the last time they did that bit. But fuck me, I was wrong. The goats are screaming their asses off constantly throughout the entire movie, and holy fuck was it ever annoying. Talk about beating a dead goat. There's an ongoing gag with Stormbreaker, Mjolnir, and Thor in an awkward love triangle that go old pretty quick. Korg is there so Taika Waititi can say dumb shit and be quirky, I guess. Pretty much every serious moment in the movie is undercut and ruined by some dumb one-liner or stupid gag that makes it incredibly difficult to sit through or care about anything that's going on, especially because none of it is even funny. The movie also has an ugly, oversaturated look to it for the majority of the runtime. A lot of scenes feel like a few actors just kind of standing in an empty room, and it really sticks out here. The pacing is whack, the editing is whack, and in general, the movie is just whack. It feels like there's a lot missing here, with scenes that just jump into the next way too early and the movie just keeps trucking on until it's over. It feels like tons of important character building is missing, especially with Gore, but we'll get to that in a minute. The way they handled Jane's story was super rushed and feels really just thrown in there. Her introduction to the movie is literally a hard cut to her in a chair receiving chemotherapy, and we're told that she has stage 4 something cancer by Darcy, this being her only scene in the movie. Then the movie just skips over anything that would explain why or how she becomes the mighty Thor, and she just shows up in New Asgard for Thor to come find out what happened. This scene in particular was disgusting to look at, and I don't know if it was because I saw this in 3D or it was just too dark, but I couldn't tell you what I was looking at. Just a blurry, dark, muddy mess of shit going on. None of it shot nearly as well or creatively as Thor's opening scene in Ragnarok when he's escaping the cave or whatever. Anyway, Thor finds out Jane is there and wielding Mjolnir, and somehow she's capable of fighting and has the IQ for it. I guess the hammer just makes you a good fighter. Not like Thor has been around for 1500-ish years and is a literal god who had to train to be as strong and capable as he is. But in this movie, who gives a shit? Moving on. Oh yeah, Gore is there. I forgot about him as he's barely in the movie. The movie opens with his story already feeling rushed and pretty random. His daughter dies in his arms, and then Gore wanders around until he stumbles across some random god. The god talks some shit to Gore, tells him he doesn't care about him, and coincidentally the Necro Sword is just lying there and Gore kills him with it. Then he says he's going to kill all the gods. Ooh. Except they don't show him killing any gods. He honestly doesn't do anything for the entire movie and only shows up to kidnap and talk shit to a bunch of terrible child actors from New Asgard. Cool. Don't get me wrong though, Christian Bale is acting his heart out here, and I respect him for being the only one in the movie who seems like they actually give a shit. Anyway, we'll come back to Gore later. I've seen a lot of people praise the chemistry between Thor and Jane in this one, and I'm really confused as to if we watch the same cut or what's going on, because I didn't buy a second of their romance. We're given a brief flashback narrated by Korg for some reason, showing their past relationship in the most generic cookie cutter way possible. And it's in this flashback where we get sort of the explanation as to how Jane is Thor. I guess Thor whispers to Mjolnir asking it to protect her no matter what, and it lights up, a magical bond is formed, I guess. Whatever, moving on. At this point in the movie, I was extremely bored, irritated with all the stupid jokes and childish tone, and was hoping that the next act of the film would turn things around. Finally, we're introduced to Zeus, played by Russell Crowe, and holy fuck, why? Just why? I can't say I was expecting greatness or anything, but he's just another goofy-ass, egotistical, kind of flamboyant joke of a character to add to all the other ones. We get to see Thor's naked ass, and all the people faint from how nice his hog is, I guess? I don't know. What's the joke here? He's naked. Oh, wow. Cool. Everyone kind of gawks at him for a minute, and I guess we're supposed to laugh. I don't know. Anyway, Zeus doesn't give a shit about helping Thor fight Gore, but then they fight. Another super generic, honestly ugly fight scene with some awful CGI and lazy choreography. Gore gets turned into pebbles, and for the first time in the movie, I felt excitement. Maybe this stupid rock bitch is gonna die and I don't have to listen to his dumb jokes anymore. Maybe we'll even get a serious moment out of his death. But no, of course not. Just the part that makes up his face is still alive and he's still able to annoy the fuck out of me. Then Thor gets a hold of Zeus's lightning bolt and kills him with it? Okay, I guess that makes sense. I don't know, who cares? Screaming goats crash into the scene and the gang leaves with a new super weapon. The next scene is more boring, forced, and rushed dialogue with Jane and Thor basically only meant to have them kiss and make up before going into a battle with Gore. I honestly feel like shit just happens in this movie and then we move on. Nothing is really given the proper amount of time to settle in and let us feel the emotional moments they're trying to hit. Anyway, we get another screaming goat gag, and now we're fighting Gore again. This scene was actually kind of cool though. I enjoyed the color being sucked out in his presence, and the fight was interesting enough. At least I could see what was happening. We learned that Gore wants Stormbreaker because he needs the Bifrost to open the door to eternity so he can wish away all the gods. Okay, well, guess what? They lose the fight. Valkyrie gets stabbed, Jane is dying from cancer, and Gore takes Stormbreaker away. The gang regroups in New Asgard and it's revealed that Jane is in fact still dying from cancer, even with the power of Thor, and every time she Thors up, it's actually killing her faster and making it harder to beat the cancer. Why is this the case? I don't fucking know. It makes no sense and kind of defeats the purpose of Mjolnir protecting her. I've been told that in the comics, Mjolnir's power kind of like burns the chemo away, but it's not really explained here, so it just comes off lazy and confusing. I don't know, whatever, moving on. Valkyrie isn't actually dead, this being the second fake out death so far, and don't worry, there's more. Thor tells Jane not to Thor up anymore because he needs her alive and he loves her and blah 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 blah, and then he goes off to fight Gore alone. And finally, here we are, the third act, final showdown, and again, this is a dark, muddy, blurry mess, and I could barely see what was going on. All I know is Thor somehow gives the power of Thor to a bunch of kids, and they fight with him. Okay, apparently he can do that now. Don't ask how or why, just accept it, I guess. Thor and Gore battle it out for a bit, and when it seems like Thor is about to lose, bam, guess what? Guess who shows up to save the day? Jane! I mean, Mighty Thor! And she makes Gore eat her hammer after saying some of the cringiest shit I've ever heard in a movie. Gore runs into the doorway to eternity, so Thor and Jane follow behind. Now we get some super lazy, cringe writing with Thor basically convincing Gore not to wish for the gods being dead, but instead wish for love and to bring his daughter back. As Jane dies in Thor's arms, Gore watches and feels inspired enough to ditch his entire character motivation and instead does the right thing. Yay. Gore tells Thor to look after his freshly spawned in Eternity Demon child and dies. What a satisfying conclusion to Gore the God Butcher. The movie ends with Thor taking the role of this random kid's father and they run into battle together as Love and Thunder. The end. What a fucking mess. The end credit scenes don't really do anything to redeem the movie either, with the first one being the third fake out death showing Zeus somehow still alive and setting up Hercules to go after Thor in the next one. The second scene is Heimdall greeting Jane in Valhalla, so I guess she's not really dead. Like, she might still be around in the future? I don't know, who knows, and honestly, who fucking cares? Thor Love and Thunder really feels like the final nail in the coffin for me in terms of my interest in the MCU right now. It's gonna take a drastic change in direction to really bring back that excitement that I've slowly been losing lately. I just don't think they really know what to do with the characters they have left, and now they're just throwing new characters at the wall to see what sticks. I guess the name of the game for Disney Marvel right now is quantity over quality, and I'm so tired of the routine at this point. They're also doing the same thing with Star Wars, but that would have to be a whole other video in itself. We've reached a point where the most interesting thing they have to offer is a callback or Easter egg to something we know from before. It feels like they don't really care about telling new, well thought out, creative stories, and instead we're getting the B, C, and D list characters being introduced to us as if we're automatically supposed to connect and care about them just because they slapped the Marvel Studios logo on it. With a new series coming out right after one ends, the superhero fatigue is definitely felt at this point. Don't get me wrong here, I hate to be so negative about this kind of stuff. I grew up with superheroes, Marvel, DC, and of course the MCU, as a lot of us have, and they will always have a place in my heart. But at the same time, I can't be one of those people who blindly gobble up anything they throw out there just because it's Marvel. In fact, it's the same reason why I'm so critical and disappointed with what they've been doing lately. I was 12 years old when Iron Man came out. At this point, I know what I like in a superhero movie and what a bad one looks like. Could it be the hype culture around the MCU is the thing that leaves us so unsatisfied? The formula is just getting old now, and maybe the MCU hit its peak with Endgame, with everything after slowly on the decline. Perhaps our expectations are too high and we're too focused on cool cameos or how the story ties into the next big Avengers type movie. I'm sure they have a big long-term plan in mind, but to keep audiences engaged and excited enough to make it actually work, they're gonna need to get to the point, and quickly. So far, Phase 4 has felt aimless, confusing, and disjointed, and with about a dozen projects released so far, it's becoming less and less interesting. The multiverse stuff is only interesting for so long before it's played out and they've done everything they can do with it. I will say I am looking forward to the idea of mutants being brought in, maybe some new versions of the X-Men that we've seen before, like they did with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. But how long are they going to make us wait? Maybe they'll tease Dr. Doom as the next Thanos level threat, with his presence looming in the back of our minds until he finally comes out of the shadows. Maybe after Kang does his thing. Who really knows? It's hard to say. Secret Wars could be the next big Avengers level event if they do it right and plant the seeds, which is kind of looking like, but I'm losing faith. With DC projects like the Suicide Squad, HBO's Peacemaker, and the Batman feeling like much needed breaths of fresh air while also receiving overwhelming praise from audiences and critics alike, it really shines a spotlight on how weak most of the MCU has been recently in comparison. The factory line cookie cutter content just isn't working anymore, and I think that's starting to become really obvious. San Diego Comic-Con is this weekend, and Marvel is rumored to reveal some stuff there, so I guess we'll see. Let's just hope they know what they're doing and this will all make sense eventually. Alright guys, so if you made it to the end of the video, I just want to say thank you for watching. Thanks for clicking on something a little different from me. I know this is something that I haven't really done before, but you know, it was fun. It's something that I really want to try doing more of going forward. Stay tuned for more reactions. We got a lot of AOT Season 4 coming for you guys, Death Note, and whatever else is down the pipeline. But yeah, I'm very excited. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave me a like and consider subscribing if you're new. It really helps me out. It helps the algorithm push my videos out to more people and, you know, enables me to continue making more content like this. Just before I go, I'm also thinking about doing a reaction video to the Comic-Con panel with Marvel Studios and covering all the news that comes out there. So look forward to that. But for now, that's it. And hopefully we'll see you guys in the next one.